everyone. My name is Jennifer Gill, and I'm the Director of Global Product Marketing at Zerto. And today we're going to talk with one of our great customers, and he's going to talk about his experience of protecting hundreds of virtual machines with Zerto to deliver a complete disaster recovery and business continuity solution. So I'll introduce Bob Lanning in just one more slide, and then he's going to talk about his organization, Premier. He'll talk about what they do, their business, give you an overview of the environment, the challenges that he had with business continuity and disaster recovery, and the impact on their application team and why Zerto. And they'll come back over to me, and we'll talk a little bit more about Zerto Virtual Replication and go into some details. One thing I did forget to mention, which I usually do on the first slide, but in the panel that appeared on the right-hand side of my screen, I don't know if that's where it appeared for you, you can see there's a questions tab in there. So you can open that up and type in a question. We'll get that, and we'll answer those verbally, perhaps throughout the webinar, definitely at the end. But if we get some kind of relevant questions, we monitor those throughout the webinar. So if we get one that pertains to exactly what Bob is talking about, then we will take the question then. Oh, so Premier is a publicly listed company, so this slide has a lot of financial jargon. What it basically means is we're not disclosing any kind of information that's going to help you in any way financially. This will help you with your disaster recovery solution, and that is it. I hope no one is terribly disappointed. Okay. So Bob Lanning is a senior infrastructure engineer with Premier. He has over 27 years of experience in IT doing basically everything, hardware, software, operating systems, VMware. And you can see that he has several certifications, Microsoft Unidesk VMware. The list goes on and on. See, I'll pick up some other ones. Cisco, experience with SQL Server Exchange. So probably how your environments look, you know, big names, Cisco, Microsoft. The names that you have in your environment, you know, Bob has experience with those as well. So at this time, I will turn it over to Bob.
Thank you, Jennifer. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Glad. Everybody tap your screen a couple of times if you can hear me. Okay, thank you. As she said, my name is Bob Lanning, and I work with Premier. Just a quick background of Premier. We are, and sometimes you'll hear us referred to as Premier Healthcare Solutions. We are probably the largest healthcare alliance based on group purchasing in North America. We have some 280 different hospital systems, each of them having many, many entities underneath them, giving us probably almost 3,000 different medical facilities that are part of our alliance. And the core business is group purchasing. We negotiate contracts with you know, the Johnson & Johnsons and Merck's and the big providers of healthcare products. And we do that for the entire alliance. So a small hospital that needs 1,000 hospital beds we take that and combine that with all the others, and so we go to a vendor and ask for 10,000 hospital beds or 100,000 hospital beds. And obviously we get a whole different pricing model based on that than they would get doing their small purchases. So that savings is passed along to them, and that's our core business. We actually, you know, we charge an admin fee for that service and collect that money for run and maintain. But at the very end of the year, we actually pay back pretty much every penny that we earned from that back to the hospitals. I think last year we gave back a little over $300 million to those entities. So we're kind of a not-for-profit, even though, as Jennifer said earlier, we're publicly traded. That was a capital investment. But for our hospital systems and so forth, we're really not-for-profit. All the money goes back to them. So that gives you a little bit about that. And part of that group purchasing, what Premier did to grow and where we're at now for disaster recovery is we collect obviously tons and tons of purchasing data from all the sales that they do, and that's super important to the chief financial officers and the materials managers at the hospitals. And we also, because we're in those hospitals, our hospitals can choose to submit their patient data to us. I think one study I saw shows that Premier gets 1 out of every 3 discharge records from every patient in America. So that gives us, a third of every bit of the information that's gathered out there. We compile all that data into probably the largest data warehouse of healthcare information maybe in the world, at least in America. And then we have tons and tons of software developers and products that we use to present that data back to the hospitals. We have outcome information that goes back to the medical officers and the doctors. We obviously have the purchasing data that goes back to the CFOs and the materials managers. We have outcomes data. We have all kinds of things. We have a safety data. We have real-time feeds in the hospital that pull data from the labs and the pharmacies and the ER facilities so that we can basically warn a hospital system if they have a potential breakout of something like MRSA or any other hospital-acquired sickness, and let them prevent an outbreak of that. So tons of data coming in to our site to be processed and then obviously reported back out primarily from a web interface. Our premierinc.com website is pretty the life of Premier from the customer standpoint. So all of that gives you a little background of what we have in our data center and what we have to do to get it back to our customers. Next slide, Ms. Jennifer. So just a quick overview of our environment. We are 95, maybe even 98% virtualized. We moved over to our current facility some 5 years ago, and I think we brought just a small percentage of our physical hardware with us. So now we're running primarily on VMware. We have some big iron Oracle systems and some Netezza data warehouse type systems, but most all of our systems, probably some 2,500, are running in VMware somewhere. Our home office and the data center that I'm in right now is in Charlotte, North Carolina. We have a DR site that's now in Culpeper, Virginia, at a Verizon Terramark facility up there. One of the big envy points, and Jennifer's pointed it out before, is that we are fortunate enough to have a 10 gig pipe to our Culpeper, and actually it's a redundant 10 gig pipe, so in theory we could have 20 gig. While that's obviously super helpful for Zerto, it's definitely not a requirement. I'll talk a little bit about our initial foray into Zerto and how we definitely did not have that pipe at the time, and it worked just as admirably for us. So that's not a requirement. Obviously that helps a whole lot, especially if you're doing some other replication technologies that are based on the physical hardware. Our initial investment in Zerto was based on basically all of our production virtual instances, and we have some 600 production instances, and we decided it was just as easy to cover all of them. I'll talk about that as a business case in a little bit, but so we basically protect all of our critical production apps with Zerto. That includes lots and lots of Microsoft SQL servers, tons of Java and Postgres and Linux instances also. All of our web services, which is one of the biggest important thing for access to our customers to our site. So there's nothing we have excluded from protection. We are just now getting into virtualizing Oracle. That's traditionally been on a big iron type system, but recently we have started the process, and once the Oracle is in our virtualization, and obviously Zerto and VMware were a big selling point to the people who have standardly refused to go virtual for Oracle and those things. Well, now that we can give them this great technology to ensure the insurance from a disaster, then they're more on board. So I can thank Zerto for that. Our backing storage, we have a lot of big iron systems from EMC, is a lot of our big databases. We've recently gotten into, it's not on this slide, but we've gone, for a lot of our virtualization, we've gone to Tentry. And if you haven't looked into that storage, I can recommend that one also. And we also use some Extreme I/O. So we're getting a little bit away from the fiber channel and the block storage and into some more network-based storage. And the great news is Zerto works just as well either way. We're pretty much a Cisco shop, so most all of our back end of our infrastructure are UCS blades. It's a great combination with VMware and with Zerto. Next slide, please. So how did we get here? Initially we had a DR facility that was in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. That's kind of the middle of the state for those of you not familiar with North Carolina. It's probably 2 hours away from here, so it's not like a huge. It'll handle a area, DR, but not necessarily a whole big region. We could still have some issues, but at the time we had limited funds, and the technology we had to use was very expensive, so we didn't really invest a ton of money into our DR facility. And it was back, originally based on a lot of physical hardware. So, a lot of our strategy was if there was a system, a Windows system or a Linux system or a Solaris system here in Charlotte that needed to have a DR solution, we would have to put up at least similar, maybe not CPU and memory-wise, but a similar physical system out in Winston-Salem, and using whatever process possible, whether that's worst case tape restores or best case some kind of replication technology like Recover Point or something to get the files there. We do our best to get the data there, but there's a lot of setup to that. It's a lot of manual configuration. There's not a lot of automation to that. So, it led itself to not really be suitable to every application being protected. And then, testing and failing over at all was very complicated. Again, many hours of setup on the back end to make it actually work. So from that standpoint, we just never really, got deep into DR just because of the struggle. We would go to our business units and say, does your app really need to be protected? And if so, that's possible, but look, here's the cost. We're going to have to buy some matching hardware out there, and you're going to have to dedicate some application management, some support, a SQL person, a DBA, whatever, to the process of A, figuring out how to get it there, and B, more importantly, being able to get it up once it's there. So that limited us to very few applications, very few pieces of hardware that we actually were willing to do out there. Next slide, please. So, we went public not long ago and have gotten some new, obviously we're HIPAA compliant and need to be very stringent there, and some other things that we needed some check boxes for. So we started looking, at our entire, DR strategy, and first and foremost tried to fix it in Winston-Salem. And we looked at some things like Recovery Manager, Site Recovery Manager from VMware, and then we were already doing some, but looking more into Recover Point. At that same time, it's like they looked at, was this, this the right place to be? So that's the same kind of time frame that we decided to go out looking for a better DR facility that better served our need, obviously better equipped and hardened, and then able to withstand more than just a regional disaster. And so with that, we were obviously going to have to either A, pick up and move some equipment, or B, purchase new. We had put in some basic VMware in our Winston-Salem facility to enhance, what we were able to do with the physical replication, but we still used fairly manual processes. I mean, we would, if we had a Windows system here that at the time probably wasn't, may have been in VMware, may not, instead of having any replication, we basically stood up another instance, another VM in Winston-Salem, and went through the same process. Though it didn't cost us physically to have another piece of hardware out there, the process of restoring and copying and getting the data back up was exactly the same. Didn't matter whether it was physical or virtual. So obviously that wasn't going to work from us. We tried Site Recovery Manager, and not to badmouth, I love VMware to death, but at the time we tried this out, it was very cumbersome. It took us probably 2.5 weeks with a third-party engagement to get it up and running. And in my opinion, and even after that, it was still not super automated. I mean, I know that they've come a long way, and anybody that's using Site Recovery Manager now would probably say, well, that's not the way it works. And that's probably true. But our experience with it was, yeah, this is almost as much work as we were doing before with our run books. So that didn't work out so well, even though we tried. You know, and since then, VMware had some replication of its own, very limited. You know, 15 minutes or so is not good enough for us, so we couldn't use, you know, the free or the included replication type stuff. So we went out and looked, and luckily we have a real good vendor, Vero, here in Charlotte that works with us a lot, and we go to them when we're kind of stumped with product. And luckily they said, you know, we do recover point a lot, but we've also started working with this new piece of software called Zerto. Obviously we had no idea what Zerto was, but listened to their story, and then with a few calls with Jennifer and the groups of very talented people up there, decided, well, we need to try that. Obviously, one of the selling points that Zerto gave us is, guys, you won't believe this stuff. In 20 minutes or less, you'll be up and running. And, you know, I've heard that the site recovery people said we should, you know, maybe a half a day or something we should be up and protecting. And again, 2.5 weeks later, I think we finally had it working. So yeah, I'm 30 years now in the industry, was very skeptical of that. I can tell you that I've said this about two pieces of software. VMware originally, to me, was magic, and Zerto is the second piece of software that I would call magic. It really was that simple. With a quick phone call, we were up and protecting several instances in probably 20 minutes or less. And think about that 20 minutes is a lot of that is them taking the time to to explain stuff to me as we're doing it. So probably 10 to 15 minutes to actually install the software and set up the first replication. It was amazing. So we were a big sell, and we obviously went from that point to start adding everything. We set up, you know, some 40 terabytes of storage on some of our most critical apps and did test failovers, and it worked exactly as they said. So, you know, there's one piece of software that you can, as an IT person, you can say, this will be magic. Next slide, please. Again, it's magic. That's my favorite, right? For us, it was magic from a couple of standpoints. Obviously, I think with our physical, you know, replication, backup, run book method, probably the earliest SLA or you know, recovery time, I guess, would be 7 hours. We promised we could have some stuff up probably within 7 hours of a real disaster. And, you know, for the apps that they had to have that are critical, that was better than nothing. But today that won't work. I mean, if the hospital can't purchase through us, it doesn't mean that they can't purchase their products. It means that they'll go themselves and purchase them directly. We get no benefit from that. They get no savings from that. So it's very critical for us. Or if they don't have that safety data. I mean, an outbreak in a hospital could happen, you know, while we were down, and that could cost lives and obviously lots and lots of dollars. So, you know, all that wasn't going to work anymore. And being able to move up into Culpeper and look for a new solution, this helped us a lot. My recovery points now, and I was looking at my screen a little earlier, are sub 10 seconds. Mostly we stay in 2 to 7 seconds, I think. So, you know, if your, you know, customers or your financial group or whatever is okay with having the data like it was, well, last night if you had to restore, or 15 minutes ago if you use some of the common replication technologies, that's great. You could save some money, but our people want it the way it was when it went down. And this is absolutely as close as I can possibly come to the way it was when it went down. We have failed over SQL instances many, many times, and without necessarily even using, you know, VSS or Snapshot, and they've been just fine. We haven't lost a single database. So obviously, they're coming up within definitely an allowable time for those database systems to be okay with it and just do their normal recovery. For the large hardware that we had, you know, we had run books, 3- and 4-inch binders full of, okay, in the case of a disaster for this system, here's the steps you're going to need to take to recover. And these were, you know, we had them for our operations staff from an OS hardware standpoint, And then even more, we had them for the application support people. They had, hours to reconfigure SQL or IIS or this web app or that web app to get them up and running. And we had to go back in and follow them up with lots of scripting and lots of, things to make that as seamless as possible. And now we don't have that. So, this seamlessly installed in our existing infrastructure, we didn't have to change a thing. I mean, I think the magic is we did all this on the fly. You don't shut anything down. You don't change out your hardware. You don't, buy new hardware. You don't do anything. You simply start protecting these on the fly. And that was big for us because we definitely didn't have exactly the same hardware in our Winston site and had no real plan to buy the same hardware for our DR facility in Culpeper. So it was key that whatever we had to work, with the hardware that we were going to purchase. And then really importantly, and a lot of people don't believe it, but there's really no impact to application performance. Because the way that Zerto works and kind of sits between the VM and the hypervisor, the VM doesn't know. It doesn't. All the writes and stuff are intercepted on the back end, so you won't affect SQL or Oracle or IIS or any of those applications by putting Zerto in between them, because it's really transparent to them. Next slide, please. So what did it do for us? I mean, obviously, besides the super ease and how it just worked, our biggest fans now are our application support teams, the people who got to go and have a binder burning party for those huge 3- and 4-inch binders. So again, we had to go in and get business justifications for the apps to go into our old site because of the expense of the hardware and the time commitment that we had, and then obviously we had to put a huge burden on our app support people. Well, now, and as we showed in the first slide, we just decided to cover all of our applications, because when we looked at it, instead of going through that business process of justifying disaster recovery and committing resources, we could simply make a one-time purchase at that time and cover everything. And so when a business owner or whatever said, "Is my app covered?" we could say yes. You say, "What did that cost me?" "Nothing. We have you covered." And so that goes a long way to build confidence from your business units and so forth. And then the pure amount of love we got was from our app support people. We told them, throw away the binders, burn them. Instead of having to have all these procedures, you have one job now. Your job is to make sure production is correct. If production is correct, DR will be correct, because we're mirroring it live. So any changes, anything you do in production will be over in DR, and as long as that application was up and working properly, when we had a failure, it will come up and work properly in DR. So what they've turned from is all of that runtime, setup and reconfiguration, to now they can do what they do best. They put out software all the time and have tons and tons of automated procedures to QA and smoke test and do whatever with these applications. So that's their only part of DR now. Quarterly, we actually do a full test of some of our apps. We don't do them all at once, but we do quarterly testing of some critical apps, and they're involved from a testing standpoint. We simply hit the button to start the failover test. Once it's up and ready for them in Culpeper, they get on and use the exact same tools they would use if they just released a new code or made a change themselves, and they test the applications and verify they work. And I can tell you that every single test we've done so far has been super successful. And they've appreciated only having to spend a few hours turning their test loose versus hours and hours of reconfiguring before test. And that's one of the big benefits. Even with SRM, there's testing facilities, but there's a lot of manual configuration and some other products. The testing on this is simple. I mean, you can actually do it anytime live that you want. If you want a basic test of, I consider it, to me, the OS guy test. I do these periodically without even telling people. I'll take a VPG and I'll do a failover test and make sure that everything comes up on the other side as expected. It's isolated, which is one of the great benefits. So we put it on basically I put it on a NIC in my DR site that has no physical attachment. So it's just, it's just a bit bucket network. And so the servers all come up and they boot up. Windows servers boot up, Linux boots up. Obviously, if there's connectivity things that they need to do, those won't necessarily work. But at least from an infrastructure guy standpoint, I can say, yep, when we fail this over, the servers are going to come up because they came up in this test. And then when we actually do the real test, I mean, Zerto is so flexible. When you fail over, obviously there's a failback process. And though it works flawlessly, our businesses want to do these tests as quickly as possible. So what has been great for us is we have the ability to, on a Friday night or whenever we're going to do it, we fail over the systems. They come up and run in Culpeper, but we don't commit the changes. So there's really two parts of a failover. There's the failover and then there's the commit. And what's nice that that's separated, if you choose, is that you have a little time to pre-test. So before you commit it and realize it's all wrong, you have an opportunity to pre-test your environment. And so we use that as our test. We fail over and we never commit. So, but they're up and running as they would on the network, all things equal. And our QA teams can test the application from end to end and make sure it's all working. And then once they verify that, if we fixed anything that had to be an issue, we simply stop that test. Everything that was in Charlotte that was running at the time was shut down as part of that process. It simply comes back up. So the servers obviously shut down on the DR site. The servers come up on the production site as they were the moment we started the test. So no loss, no anything like that. So that gives us the ability to do those tests way more frequently and not have to worry about spending all weekend if there's some large data that needs to be replicated back. So that's been very beneficial to us, and that's what I really like about Zerto is its flexibility. It gives us the options of being very granular with our VPGs. We don't have to, think of SRM, at least in my day when we were doing it, it was based on a full data store. So as long as you were willing to go through and set up your data stores exactly right with only the applications you want replicated to fail over, that's great, but that's something you had to do. Where now is you simply group them logically by business, by function, by whatever you want to do. And then you can individually test or fail over those apps as you need to. And that's what gives us, again, the ability to do basically quarterly testing for those different applications. Next slide. Is there done?
I think you are all done.
Was that Alfie? Cool.
Great. Thank you so much, Bob. So we did get one question that came in around licensing, so I'll answer that. So someone asked, enterprise is great, but what about for people who are the S and the SMB? So some are just a couple of guests running on a server. So although we have customers like Bob who are protecting hundreds and even thousands of VMs, we do have customers who are protecting just a few VMs. So our licensing actually starts with a base package of 15 virtual machines that you can protect. So that's where we start. So if you have 15 and you can start that level if you want to add onesie, twosie. So if you go from 15 to 16, you can buy the base package plus one more. So of course we do have volume pricing. So if you buy in bulk and you buy large quantities, we do discounts for the volume purchases. But if you want to just start small, we can start small with you too. You can see why I wanted to hear from Bob because he, one, he loves the product, but two, he just really, covers all the bases that all of you want to hear about. So, what did the process look like before? What were we kind of looking at for competition, and how has this made things easier over at Premier? So really, really helpful. So now we'll get into some of the product specifics. So Zerto Virtual Replication. So we're a virtualware solution. So what do I mean by that? We protect VMs and VMDKs. We don't protect LUNs. It is a software-only solution, and you'll see that in the architecture. And enterprise class. And although when people see enterprise class, some think we mean large environments, what we mean actually is that we can protect your enterprise class applications. And whether you're a small business with 10 people or a large business, all of you have an application that, if it were to be unavailable, it would really affect your business. So that's what we mean by enterprise class. So there we have very aggressive service levels, and you heard Bob talking about his seconds of RPO, which is pretty amazing. And we have application consistency. That's through the virtual protection groups that Bob mentioned. And we also deliver a continuous data protection. And the entire failover, failback process is automated. Any, those hit by the bus books and those, 3-inch and 4-inch binders where you're executing all those steps, that's not a real solution for a DR failure. If you're in the middle of a big emergency, you can't be going through, hundreds and hundreds of pages of a process. And with Zerto, we automate that to keep things easier. So here we have a simple overview of the architecture, and I say simple because here we have 2 sites, and Zerto does protect multiple sites. So you can see the Zerto Virtual Manager plugs right into vCenter Server, and then on each host within the environment, we have the Zerto Virtual Replication appliance. The Zerto Virtual Manager is the only piece of software that you'll touch. It manages the virtual replication appliances. Completely, you don't have to be in there looking at updates and upgrades and those kinds of things. These aren't agents. They don't require babysitting like an agent does. They're an appliance. So replicate from anything to anything. So you heard Bob talk about that, the ability to have one kind of storage in their production environment and then having anything they want in their disaster recovery site. Highly scalable, so those VRAs, just as you add another ESX host, you just install another VRA. The continuous block level replication delivers those very, very aggressive service levels. It's not synchronous, but it's very, very, very close. Again, just a couple of seconds of RPOs. The journal is 1 hour up to 5 days worth of data. And these checkpoints are available every couple of seconds. So although this can be used in a DR scenario, it also helps in terms of logical failures. So think about if you updated a server, applied a patch, and it just wasn't quite right once you made that small change. You can go into Zerto, go into the journal, you applied that at 4 o'clock, roll it back to 3:59 and 47 seconds, and completely undo that update. We also do some things for bandwidth optimization, so compression, throttling, those kinds of things. So the virtual protection group allows us to group together VMs that are part of one application. So for many enterprise applications, they don't consist of just one virtual machine. There's your database VM, your application VM, your web portal VM, maybe a couple other VMs in there. But even though there are many VMs, you want them to be protected exactly the same because they're part of one application. So the virtual protection group delivers consistency of those VMs across that group. So this ensures right order fidelity, and also ensures the VMs are in a consistent state so that you can, in fact, effectively recover. These groups also allow you to take advantage of things like vMotion and storage vMotion. So even if you move a VM between a couple of hosts and you move from one place to another, Zerto Virtual Replication will track it because of that VPG and say, oh, this VM has moved from this host over to here, which is fine, but it's still part of this virtual protection group. I'm going to make sure I continue to apply policies in the same manner. With other solutions, you don't have that flexibility and mobility. Once you move the VM, you have to do some reconfiguration on the LUN size and things like that. And that's where the overhead for other solutions can become challenging and expensive. With Zerto, because it's virtually aware, everything that happens in the hypervisor, it's aware of. So the automation is really important. Bob mentioned the 3, 4-inch binders, many, many steps. With Zerto, we don't have that. So the data is replicated. It's over at the target site. We don't have shadow VMs. The data to create the virtual machines is stored on the target site, though. And then once you hit the arrow in the interface, it starts to build those virtual machines automatically based on how you configure your virtual protection group. So for example, you might have things like boot order. So have the database server available first, then the application server, then the web server. If you need different IP addresses, that will be done on the fly as well. So now the virtual machines are ready in the correct order. So the click to test anytime, so you heard Bob mention that he does tests and doesn't tell anybody. It's because we have the ability within the virtual protection group to put in 2 IP addresses. So you'll say, when I'm failing over for production, here's the IP addresses I want the VMs to have. And then when I'm going to fail over for a test, it can go into this bubble network. And this would be something that you built in your environment. I'm sure all of you have the sandbox environment that's available to you. So you'd use that IP address and then build the VMs in that sandbox, and you'd be able to see, gee, that happened the right way, the VMs booted in the correct order. And because it's in that isolated environment, you'll never have any, it'll never interfere with production. And during this test, and I think Bob mentioned this as well, he's such a great guy to talk about Zerto the way he does. Because you're doing this within that sandbox environment, you can do it anytime. If something happens, you can stop the test. While the test is executing, replication is still occurring. You are still protected. There are no vulnerabilities during the test. If something happens, you need to do a live failover, stop the test, do your live failover. We also have an offsite cloning feature, so if you wanted to, give the application team who's doing development, so you can give them a more up-to-date copy of the application. So you can say, hey, instead of doing some development on what the application looked like a week ago, let me give it to you what it looked like at around lunchtime today. So it just helps them get a higher quality product out because they're dealing with a more recent copy of what the environment looks like. So Zerto Offsite Backup, so this is a feature that we added in June. So because you already have the infrastructure in there for disaster recovery, why don't we try to leverage that and make it a little bit more useful? And one way that we thought we could do that is to take a backup from the replicated data. So that information can be stored locally at the replication site. It can also go to a third site. And this is useful in many ways. One, it can fulfill your backup needs, depending on what those requirements look like. Then the off chance that your protected site and your DR site are both down, you still do have this backup available to use to recover. So you can see the virtual backup appliance is on the target site. That's going to manage all the operations for the offsite backup feature. It's based on virtual protection group. So depending on which protection group you're looking at, it may have different requirements. So maybe one you say, you know what, backing up this VPG once a night is okay. Maybe you want to do another one at 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. So you can configure that within the product. Different types of repositories can be leveraged. So as I said, we can do local to the DR site. You can go to a third site. And we also support the ability to store the backups in Amazon, the S3 storage. So you can't run in Amazon, but you can store the backup there. And this works for vSphere or vCloud environments. So here you can see what the backup package looks like. This is just a portable flat file, and this is why we are able to recover in any type of environment. So you can see on the right-hand side, that's just telling you what you're looking at. So you can see the VPG, and it's at a particular checkpoint, so it's at midnight. It has the flat file, the configuration information. You can see there are 2 VMs in this virtual protection group. There's a config file for each, and then the volume data. But this is what's more critical. It is a flat file, so that means it can be shared with any Zerto virtual manager in any file system. And all of the VMs in the backup package are at the same consistent point in time. So we talk about simple management from anywhere. So on the left-hand side, you can see it's a plugin right into vCenter. So you can see this little Zerto tab. We don't want to create another interface for you to go to and have to manage. This way you can stay right into vCenter. It's a very simple plugin. And if you do want to leverage another interface, we have that option as well. So it's browser-based, and you can access this from anywhere. And there at the bottom, you can see kind of the arrow. This is what you do when you want to fail over. So right now it's set to test, so it's all blue. If I were to slide that up to red, the arrow turns red to let you know you're doing a production failover. So you get kind of that extra warning. So we talked about 2 sites, but we are able to protect multiple sites. So if you do have many sites, we have several customers have it deployed in this fashion, as well as our cloud service providers. So you can replicate from several different sites into one shared infrastructure. Zerto is natively multi-tenant, so you're able to use that shared infrastructure to help reduce costs. There we go. They all came up at once. Oops. Sorry about that. We went a little faster than I planned. There are no limitations in terms of distance you want to replicate to, so you can replicate internationally. And we do have customers that replicate from like the U.S. to the U.K. or from the U.S. to the Middle East. Of course, your RPO won't be 2 to 7 seconds, but we are able to support that level of replication. The customer that's replicating from the Boston area to the UK, he's seeing about 25 seconds for RPO, so pretty good. Bidirectional replication, so we have several customers. They don't have a dedicated DR site. They have production across 2 sites, and that way when they fail over, they can just go fail over 50%, from A to B or B to A. So we do support bidirectional replication, and also replication within a single vCenter. So if for any of you who have remote offices or branch offices that although are geographically separate, they might be under the same vCenter server, we can do replication between those sites as well. Although you can see from the diagram there around the US, that's from the local sites into the larger data center only. Bidirectional replication is not offered for our robos. And then as I mentioned, we do of course support cloud providers. Okay. So comprehensive reporting. So we do have audit reports. So when you do that disaster recovery test, it'll show each step that was executed in that test, the time it took, and did it execute successfully. If you have auditors, they love this report. I have one customer in particular. He loves this report because he just does the test, give it to the auditors, and they doesn't have to talk to them too much. He says they're very intimidating. So with this report, he can just give this to them, and then they're happy, he's happy, everyone's happy. Detailed resource planning, so we look at WAN consumption, IOPS. You can look at what resources the virtual machine is consuming at the source and the target site, so you can get a good idea of how your environment's growing and better plan for additional assets you might need, storage, bandwidth, etc. Performance charts, so you can look at throughput, bandwidth, things like that. And then the backup report. So once you configure your offsite backup processes, in the morning you'll get a report that says, yep, these VPGs are backed up per your requirements and everything was executed properly. Or it will tell you a backup did not execute, and then you can do some investigative work and see what happens. So we've talked a lot about disaster recovery in a private cloud environment where the corporate data centers are under your control and you have a separate DR site. But we also work with many cloud providers to offer disaster recovery as a service. So they take the Zerto product and build a service that they could resell to end users. This is a great way to evaluate the cloud because disaster recovery as a service is going to enable you to put the cloud provider through the paces a little bit more rigorously than, say, backup as a service. Because backup as a service, you're doing like once a night, something like that. Whereas with DRAS, you're continuously replicating, and then you also have the ability to run the disaster recovery tests. And then as you become more and more comfortable with the cloud provider, I'm sure all of you have that application that's just cranky, and you would love to not have it anymore. So give that to the cloud provider. Let them do production and DR. Take that cranky application away. And we have many, many cloud providers that we work with. Here's just a sampling of some of them. So Zerto Virtual Replication, it's truly virtual aware. It's built for your production applications, the one that you use to run your business. It's scalable, software only, and very, very simple. That's, the installation in 20 minutes and all that stuff, that's true. I run our customer reference program, so I get to talk to many, many of our customers. As we have so many, I haven't spoken with all of them, but I've spoken with many. And they just can't believe the simplicity of the product. I mean, the comment I get the most is your product does what it says it's going to do, and it's just too good to be true. So we do proof of concepts. If you'd like to reach out to us, we'd love to hear from you. And you can try out the software yourself. And then I think on the last slide, there we go. Oh, Bob, we forgot to update your title. Senior Infrastructure Engineer at Premier. So
That's okay, I answered anything.
Okay. So you can reach out to myself or to Bob if you have any other questions. And we do have a few more that came in. Let's see. So the next question, does Zerto offer business continuity for VMware View? At this time, we don't protect the specific VMs, virtual machines like the desktops, but we can protect the infrastructure. So anything within the ESXi or ESX environment. Our sales engineer can speak to that a little bit better than I can, so if you want to send me an email if I didn't answer your question completely, I can put you in touch with one of our SEs.
Jennifer, I could add, I mean, just a little bit that, I mean, you're right, you can definitely protect the connection servers and your security servers and your composer servers, and if you happen to be using full desktops, full VM desktops, not link clones or anything, those could easily be replicated too, and it would be fairly simple to bring that up in another environment. We're doing some of that here.
Oh, look at that. Thanks, Bob. So also, is this presentation being recorded? It is, and it should be posted on our website if you look probably towards the end of the week. If you go to zerto.com and then resources, you'll probably see it up there on Friday. Maybe sooner, but the SLA I have with our web guy is, the end of the week. So, and does Zerto ever plan on protecting Hyper-V? Yes, we do. We're actually going to be going into beta with Hyper-V very soon. And in early Q2 in April, you should see a release from us with Hyper-V support. Someone asked, we're still on vSphere 5. Would we need to upgrade? No. We're supported from vSphere 4.0 update 1, I believe. And actually, I'm going to have to sneak in. We have Shannon Snowden on the line, who's our Senior Technical Marketing Architect. And he'll know those right off the top of his head. Did I say it right, Shannon? Is it 4.0 update 1?
4.1.
Oh, 4.1, okay.
Yeah, 4.1 all the way through the current version, and then we're always testing what's coming out next. So you saw the announcement of 6 coming out. We've been testing it in beta since they released it for the development partners.
And then someone, is the backup option part of the enterprise licensing? So yes, it is. Everything I showed you today is licensed, and that's by protected virtual machine. And then actually Shannon reminded me, so if someone was interested in just protecting 1 or 2 guests, working with our cloud providers might be a great option for you, because they would certainly take on a 1 or 2 or 5 type of scenario. Someone wants to know, will Oracle be supported? So we do have customers that are protecting Oracle with Zerto right now. If you go to that same resources page, you can see a video with Loophole and Stevens, and they're protecting Zerto. You're protecting Oracle with Zerto. I'm just not going to be able to say that right. And I don't know, Bob, are you protecting Oracle in your environment? I don't believe so, but I just want to check.
Not yet, but as soon, like I said, we're starting our first foray into Oracle on VMs, and we will absolutely cover them with Zerto.
Okay. All right, I'll give it another minute for anyone who's a slower typer and wants to get in a couple questions. But as I mentioned, so we do proof of concepts. They are free. We'll come and install the software in your environment, and you can try out, a couple of VMs, get them replicating. Many of our customers talk about how they just flipped their POC over to their production environment. So that's how it all gets started. Someone's asking if there's an MSP program or a VAR program. So we do have the Zerto Alliance Partner Program. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but why don't you send me an email and I can get you over to our Director of Channel Partner Marketing, and she'll be able to get you plugged into the right program, because we have a couple partner programs, one for cloud service providers and, of course, one for resellers. And then the only other thing I'll add is we do support vCloud Director as well. So vSphere to vCloud, vCloud to vSphere, Hyper-V support is coming. And also we do have some support with Amazon with our backup feature. And we're looking at disaster recovery to Amazon environments as well. All right, well, it looks like that's all the questions we have. Thank you, everyone, for staying on with us today. We really appreciate it. Bob, thank you for your fantastic presentation.
You're welcome as always.
All right, thanks. All right, everyone, have a great day. If we can help you with anything else, please just send us an email. And we look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks. We'll have another webinar. Take care. Bye-bye.